I did feel that I was feeling bereaved myself in a way. It wasn't like, certainly the impact of that sorrow would never be like, the kind of the parents would be feeling. But I think journalists are kind of subjected to a mix of emotions, mix of different strands of sorrow, so to speak, and eventually that they have to put things in perspective. They have to be able to put aside for the moment that sorrow and focus on objectively trying to at least objectively write stories about what they're seeing.
What we do with our words is to create empathy for the story. Our ability to connect with the subject, with the story, means that we can then tell that story to the audience. And if we can make that intimate connection, comes at an emotional cost. You just heard that. Chung-Hae Lee, you actually covered this aspect of the story of emotions, and the story of the impact of this tragedy on journalists as well. Please tell us about it.
I haven't actually covered the story, but I met journalists who did cover the story, the Dart Center for Drama Journalism. And they were saying it was a man-made disaster, and it's always more difficult if it's a man-made disaster because the victim feels they were pinpointed. And also they feel if they did anything different, they might have not been in this situation. So it's much more difficult to cover them. And also that usually they see their age, are you 18, under 18 or over 18 when this happened. And they say if you're under 18, you feel that the world is not safe, the adults didn't protect you. So it's much more difficult to recover. So they were asking to ask the journalists to share their stories, and they will have something that they will want to say. So I met 10 SBS journalists, and some of the things that came up was that they said even in a breaking news situation, to doubt anything. That even if it's government official who's saying it is, you should doubt and you should investigate it. I think one of the big things in Korea that from last administration, the investigative reporting programs were really suppressed. So not a lot of young journalists were trained to investigate that much. And I think that was one of the factors that for one thing, they were not trained, and also that so few people went and they had to be on the news for so long hours, they didn't have time to investigate even if they had the skills. But I think they were not that much trained, so that was one thing. And the other thing that they were saying to quote who said it, that usually what happened was that they said everybody was safe, but they didn't mention who said that. So later it was the media who was being blamed, that you misled us, you were the wrong people who tell the false. Where actually when I checked, they said they checked 2 or 3 sources, so it wasn't just one people saying that they said, okay, everybody is alive. They checked the school, they checked the government officials, so they were trying. It wasn't that they were not doing their work, but still, if the government is trying to cover something, it's hard to figure out. But even in those circumstances, if you could quote who said it, then later maybe it will be easier to not be blamed on the media. And also they were saying that this kind of disaster covering has to have a guidelines and it has to be trained ahead. And also you have to be trained, especially for psychological trauma, to see these people, to be aware the people who you're meeting could be psychologically traumatized and they might be in shock, that they might not be talking logically, and also they might be very angry, they might be very aggressive. If you are aware of that, then it doesn't shock you so much. But if not, when you approach and you're trying to tell the story and you think you're doing the right thing and they're like throwing water bottles at you, then you get affected about that too. So to know who you're dealing with and what symptoms might happen is also something that they said we should be thinking of. And also they were saying that to listen to the victims, not just ask them. That one of the things I think with the problem with the Korean journalists was a lot of them at first who went was a very young journalist. So that even if they thought the scene was different with what the headquarters were saying. It was hard to persuade the headquarters that this is not the things we should be asking. So after this happened, they kind of talked about the system. Next time if something like this happens, it's more senior level seniors also have to go there. So could also maybe investigate, but also be a mediator, so that they could help to really tell what's happening and what not just the headquarters thinks is happening, but what actually is happening and what stories should be told.
I wouldn't send a young reporter who's never covered anything like this, who's never had to interview a victim of a disaster. I think that you're sending a reporter in without any preparation, really. I think most of our reporters at the Times, anyway, have had some of this experience already, and so it's but there are a few that haven't. And that's you got to pick the right people. I don't think that in general, though, if you've had this experience, if you know how to do this reporting, that there's a lot of preparation that you need to give a reporter. I was and I think different reporters sort of respond differently to this type of situation. And you get to know that as an editor just from talking to them and reading their work.
In an event like this, you should also remember that it's very important to be extremely apologetic when you're asking a question to a parent who might have lost a child. You just gotta be I don't know what other tips there could be. You just gotta be extremely polite. And if they tell you just, F up, you don't take it as an insult. It's just, you just gotta say, I'm sorry, and step up. But what I often worry about is, and it just has to do with the overall media landscape, Korean media. I mean, I started out at a Korean company called Yonhap, and the training that they give you to get comments from people who's just lost family members. I mean, there are there's lots of journalists in Korea who take pride in their being thick-skinned. They're being offensive enough that they would be able to get stuff, and it doesn't really how the people that they speak to, how they feel, doesn't exactly strike a chord with them. And I know how, because I went through part of the training, getting up to the people in hospitals, in the just speaking to family members, and they take pride in that. And I think that kind of culture in the Korean land media kind of led partly to the parents being really, really fast about these things. But what I would suggest is that just be extremely apologetic. I know you're under the gun, but I don't know, you just gotta be able to walk the fine line and just come up with your own ways of, not offending the other person, but trying to get, at least you can still get your story. It's just a very difficult thing. It's just, you just gotta play it by ear, I guess.
One thing we do is we have, I guess, the first piece of advice is you make sure that your technology works. It's really basic, but when you're a young reporter, sometimes you go out to a scene and you don't have the right equipment. Batteries, cell phones, sat phones if you need it. Test it all the time to make sure it's working, because if you go and you can't report, you can't file, you're not doing anybody any good. And that happens every once in a while with some even senior reporters. We actually, at the Times, we recommend that each bureau has like a kit. Just basically a bag that's packed with all sorts of things that you might need in a sort of disaster scenario, and just have that sort of ready. Sometimes there are batteries that need to be charged, every 6 months or every 3 months, and that's become some kind of routine that has to be done so that it's always ready to go. So I guess that's the first thing, is just make sure you have what you need. And just going back to some of the remarks here, I mean, in terms of like the practice of interviewing people who have gone through trauma, I mean, I think the advice that I generally give reporters is that they just should act like human beings. If the competition is like in their, especially sometimes video or there's this demand for photos or videos and they're sort of in people's faces, for us at least, we can sort of back off. And I think actually the best photographers also tend to back off in those situations. You're not going to get great footage and a great photograph in that type of environment anyway. So, number one, just act like a human being, be respectful, and people respond to that. The other part of it is, I think you should understand why you're doing your job. You're not, the editor or the company is not asking you to do this to exploit a tragedy. We're trying to inform the world about something terrible that's happened. Often we're trying to hold people accountable for what's happened. And I think if you approach people, explain who you are and why you're doing your job. You're not just trying to get a quote. You're doing this because people, you want to tell the world what's happening. There are unanswered questions that you want to help answer. People respond to that. And actually, if you have that sort of self-knowledge, I think it helps you do your job as well.
Far is to carry lots of cash. Credit cards will not work. For example, in Jindo, no taxi driver will take your credit card. It's all cash. And also, I guess it's better to rent a car if you can. It's very hard to get a taxi fast in a remote place, and so I just got his phone number. And at the end of the day, we almost became friends. And at the end of the trip, we got so close that he even offered his brother's puppies. Jindo is quite an island known for the dogs from that area. And I still to this day I regret that I declined. But make sure that there's going to be things that are totally unexpected, but always make sure that you bring a lot of cash, because cash will, if you live in a capitalist country, it'll do a lot of wonders. Yeah.
I'll add a little tip. I made the mistake of being caught out in the field in uncomfortable shoes. I had the comfortable shoes back at the desk, but we had to go to the scene. It ended up being a 10-hour standoff between a gunman who had held university students hostage, killed a couple, and I was stuck out there by the end of the night, and I forgot if I ate or went to the bathroom. But I do remember I could not feel my toes for the next 3 days. Bring comfortable shoes.
I had an experience to talk with some of the families of the victims of Seoul Ferry last year with the Korean Broadcasting Journalists Association. And some of the things that they were raising was to don't ask how do you feel. They said the worst question that really made them really, really mad was when they asked, how do you feel? That they said, you will assume how I feel, and I can't even express how I feel. And when you force me to say that with my mouth, it makes me even madder. And he said, when you write it, you don't really have to know what I feel right now. That even if you don't have that quote, you can write a good story. But always journalists come in, and first thing that they try to ask is, how do you feel? And they were saying, please don't do that. And the other thing is what both of you already mentioned, but please respect them. That they were saying some incidents, like someone will come up with a really sad face and will ask about what happened, and they will assume it was a family member and will be telling them what happened. And later on, they will figure out that it was a journalist. And they were saying that if you just come up and tell who you are, they will decide if they will talk with the journalist or not, or if they will talk with them later. But faking like that made them so devastated. And they were saying that journalists were seeing us as a story, not as a human being. And they were saying, please respect us. That was one of the messages that they really wanted to tell the journalists.